A lonely cowboy, Dusty McCall, witnessed a chilling scene. A wagon surrounded by bandits and a woman in chains inside. In this world of cruelty and loss, he decided to be a hero. He freed her. He saved her life. But what happened in the next moment shocked him. She wasn't just a victim. She had her own terrible secret, and she did something completely unexpected. Something that changed the rules of the game forever. Why were the bandits so desperate to find her? What forbidden mystery was she hiding while in chains? And how will her unpredictable act force the cowboy, who was seeking redemption, to face the worst of the Wild West? Watch until the end to discover the shocking choice the rescued woman made and how that decision turned their escape into a deadly hunt, where the prey and the predator switch roles. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty plains of the Wild West. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles like a storm before the rain. A lone rider, Dusty McCall, moved through the desolate landscape, his heart heavy with the burdens of solitude. He had once been a prosperous rancher, the pride of Willow Creek, but a series of misfortunes had left him with little more than the clothes on his back and an unyielding spirit. The loss of his wife to a fever had changed him, and he found himself wandering the prairies, searching for purpose in a world that felt increasingly cruel. His horse, a wary chestnut named Rusty, picked its way through the dry grass, hooves clopping softly against the hardened earth. Dusty's gaze was distant, lost in memories of laughter and warmth that now felt like echoes from a long-forgotten dream. Just ahead, he spotted a plume of dust rising into the air, swirling with a ferocity that betrayed the approach of something or someone unwelcome. As he drew closer, the scene came into focus. A wagon, its wooden frame splintered and battered, surrounded by a group of rough-looking men. They were clad in dusty leather and wild-eyed like wolves, their laughter slicing through the stillness like a hawk's cry. Dusty's heart quickened. Something was very wrong. He slid off Rusty, tying the horse to a nearby sagebrush, and crept closer, his pulse pounding in his ears. The men were gathered around the wagon, their attention fixated on a figure inside, a woman, chained and helpless, her eyes wide with fear. Dusty's stomach knotted as he caught sight of the glint of metal that bound her wrists. The men jeered, tossing crude jests at her, their laughter echoing across the vast emptiness. Dusty's mind raced. He had always believed in standing up for the oppressed, in fighting against the injustices that festered in the shadows. But this was different. These men were not just a band of outlaws, they were a pack of wolves, and he was but one lone sheep. Yet, as he watched the woman struggle against her chains, a fire ignited within him. He could not walk away, not now, not when she needed him. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and stepped into the light, revealing his presence. The laughter ceased, replaced by an unsettling silence. The men turned, their eyes narrowing with suspicion as they sized him up. Dusty clenched his fists, trying to project a confidence he did not fully feel. "What's going on here?" he called out, his voice steady despite the tremor of fear that coursed through him. The leader of the men, a burly fellow with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward, a sneer curling his lips. "Just a bit of entertainment, friend. Best be on your way if you know what's good for you." Dusty's gaze flickered to the woman, her eyes pleading, and he felt the weight of her desperation pressing against him. "You're hurting her," he said, his voice rising. "Let her go." The men erupted in raucous laughter once more, but Dusty stood firm. In that moment, he felt a profound connection with the woman. Her suffering was a mirror to his own, a reminder of all the loss he had endured. He would not let her face this fate alone. "Is that so?" the leader taunted, stepping closer, his hands resting on the revolvers at his hips. You think you can just waltz in here and play the hero?" Dusty's heart raced, but he held his ground. "I don't want trouble, but I won't let you take her life." The scarred man's grin faded, replaced by a dangerous glint in his eyes. "You're making a mistake, cowboy. This is no place for a white knight." In a flash, Dusty made his decision. He lunged forward, grabbing a nearby rock from the ground and hurled it at the leader, catching him off guard. The man stumbled back, reaching for his gun instinctively, but Dusty was already moving, racing toward the wagon. "Get her out of there!" he shouted, his heart pounding with adrenaline as he reached for the chains binding her wrists. The other men, startled from their stupor, scrambled to react, cursing and shouting as they lunged for him. The woman's eyes widened with disbelief as Dusty fumbled with the lock, his fingers trembling. The chains rattled, the sound mingling with the yells of the men behind him. If he could just free her, he could give them both a fighting chance. Finally, with a wrenching pull, the lock gave way and the chains clattered to the ground. Dusty turned, urgency igniting a fierce determination within him. "Run!" he urged her, adrenaline surging through his veins as he faced the approaching men. But in a moment of clarity, the woman grasped his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, we can't just run. They'll hunt us down." Dusty's heart sank. She was right. Fleeing would only lead to more violence. He scanned the area, searching for an escape route, when he noticed a small thicket of trees nearby, a potential refuge. "We can hide," he said, his voice urgent as he pulled her along. As they dashed toward the trees, bullets whizzed past them, kicking up dirt and splintering bark. Dusty's instincts kicked in, and he urged her to move faster, adrenaline propelling them forward. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, but he couldn't think of the risks now. All that mattered was her safety. They reached the thicket, ducking behind a cluster of gnarled roots as the men's shouts grew more frantic. Dusty could feel her trembling beside him, and he turned to face her, his heart pounding in rhythm with the chaos around them. "What's your name?" he asked, breathless. "Clara," she replied, her voice a whisper, but there was a strength in her gaze that gave him hope. "Thank you for saving me." Dusty shook his head, the weight of the moment crashing over him. "I couldn't leave you there. No one deserves that." But as they crouched in the shadows, Dusty felt a surge of fear. He had acted on instinct, but now they were both in danger. The men were determined, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they found them. He needed a plan, a way to turn the tide. "Clara," he said, his voice steadying, "I need you to trust me. We can't let them catch us. We need to fight back." She nodded, and in that moment, Dusty realized that this was about more than just survival. It was about standing up against the darkness that threatened to consume them both. Together, they would face the storm. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The thicket loomed just ahead, a tangled mass of twisted branches and brambles that offered a slim chance of cover. Dusty McCall felt the weight of Clara's gaze upon him as they sprinted toward its refuge, adrenaline surging through his veins like wildfire. He could hear the distant shouts of the outlaws, their voices thick with menace and urgency. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that made the world around them feel both ominous and alive. "Over here," Dusty urged, pulling Clara into the protective embrace of the underbrush. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faintest hint of wild sage, but there was no time to appreciate it. He could feel his heart pounding, each thump echoing the urgency of their situation. Clara's breathing was rapid, a rhythm that mirrored his own, and he turned to her, trying to gauge her state. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low yet laced with concern. She shook her head, her eyes wide and fierce, betraying both fear and something else, determination. Just a bit shaken," she replied, her voice steadying with each word. "They won't stop until they find us." Dusty nodded grimly, his mind racing. He was no stranger to danger. He'd faced it plenty of times in his years as a rancher, but this felt different. The stakes were higher, and the weight of Clara's freedom rested heavily on his shoulders. "We need a plan," he murmured, scanning the thick foliage that surrounded them. "Plan?" Clara echoed, disbelief flickering across her features. "We need to get out of here, Dusty. Those men—" "They're not just going to let us walk away," he interrupted, his voice firm. "They'll hunt us down. We need to turn the tables." Clara bit her lip, considering his words. Dusty could see the gears turning in her mind, the spark of resilience igniting in her eyes. "What do you suggest?" she asked, her tone betraying a hint of the steel that lay beneath her vulnerability. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "We'll need to wait until they're close. I'll draw their attention, and you find a way to flank them. You've got that knife, right?" She nodded, her hand instinctively moving to the small blade she had hidden in her boot. "I do, but I don't want you to get hurt." "I can take care of myself," he assured her, though the truth of it was more complex. He was weary, burdened by the weight of his past and the ghosts that haunted him. But if there was a chance to help her, a chance to stand against those men, he would fight with everything he had. The sound of hooting laughter reached them, slicing through the stillness like a hawk's cry. Dusty's blood ran cold. The outlaws were drawing nearer, their footsteps crunching against the dry ground. "Now or never," he said. "Get ready." Clara nodded, and for a fleeting moment their eyes locked with an understanding that transcended words. They were two lost souls, bound by circumstance, ready to face a hellish storm together. Dusty took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He could feel the warmth of the sun on his back, and with it came a sense of clarity. He wasn't just a man seeking redemption, he was a man standing for something greater than himself. As the outlaws approached, Dusty slipped from the thicket, the sound of rustling leaves masking his movements. He crouched low, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum, every instinct screaming at him to run. But retreat wasn't an option, not now. "Hey, you lot!" he shouted, his voice carrying across the dusty expanse. The men paused, surprised by the sudden intrusion. Dusty's heart raced as he watched them turn, their expressions shifting from confusion to fury. "Look what we got here!" The scarred leader, a brutish figure with a jagged scar running down his cheek, barked. "The little hero thinks he can play the knight!" Dusty swallowed hard, keeping his chin high. "I'm not letting you take her back," he declared, every word thick with conviction. "You've had your fun. It's time to leave her be." The leader laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the distant hills. "You think you can stop us? You're outnumbered and outgunned, cowboy." His men cackled, the sound like the chattering of crows, filling the air with a sense of foreboding. "Maybe so," Dusty replied, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. "But I'm not afraid of you." With that, he lunged forward, adrenaline surging through him like a river breaking free from its banks. The outlaws, taken off guard by his audacity, hesitated just long enough for Dusty to close the distance. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he focused on his purpose. He struck out, his fist colliding with the nearest outlaw's jaw. The man stumbled back with a grunt, surprise etched across his features. Dusty didn't pause. He spun on his heel, delivering a swift kick to another man's midsection, sending him crashing to the ground. The remaining outlaws had recovered from their shock and were rushing toward him, their shouts filling the air. Dusty ducked and weaved, every movement a desperate dance for survival. He could hear Clara's voice in his mind, urging him on, giving him strength. "Now!" he shouted, hoping she was ready. From the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of her. She'd emerged from the thicket, her small dagger glinting in the fading sunlight. Dusty's heart soared. She was fighting back, refusing to be a victim any longer. Clara moved with a grace that belied her earlier fear, darting towards one of the outlaws who had turned to face her. She was a vision of determination, a flash of steel against the backdrop of chaos. Dusty felt a surge of pride mixed with anxiety as he continued to fend off the men advancing on him. But the odds were against them. Dusty was tiring, and the outlaws' numbers were overwhelming. He could feel the bruises forming on his body, the sting of pain igniting with each blow he took. Just as he began to falter, Clara struck. She lunged at the leader, her dagger slicing through the air like a whisper of vengeance. The leader turned, his eyes widening in shock as her blade met flesh. He roared in pain, staggering back, momentarily distracted by the unexpected attack. Dusty seized the opportunity. "Finish him!" he shouted, springing forward to take on the remaining men. Clara didn't hesitate. She pressed her advantage, determination radiating from her as she fought alongside him. They were no longer just two people bound by circumstance. They were allies, united against a common enemy. With each blow they struck, the tide began to turn. Dusty felt a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the fire ignited by Clara's resilience. They were fighting not just for survival, but for freedom, a chance to reclaim their lives from the hands of those who sought to control them. The skirmish raged on, a chaotic ballet of fury and desperation. Dusty caught a glimpse of the scarred leader, his face twisted in rage and pain, and he knew that this fight was far from over. But as he exchanged blows with the men, he felt a flicker of hope. They could win this, together. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the battleground, as the clash of bodies echoed against the desolate backdrop. Dusty and Clara fought side by side, two souls entwined in the dance of defiance, ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. And as the dust swirled around them like a storm, they would not back down. They would stand tall against the shadows, determined to carve out their own destiny in a world that had tried to chain them. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Dusty McCall stood in the thicket, heart hammering in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins like wildfire. The shouts of the outlaws echoed behind him, their voices thick with anger and disbelief. Clara, breathless and wide-eyed, clutched the knife Dusty had passed to her, the blade glinting in the low sun. It had been a desperate gamble, but it seemed to have paid off, at least for the moment. "Can you fight?" Dusty asked, his voice low and urgent. Clara nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I can. I won't go back to that wagon, Dusty, not alive." The resolve in her eyes sent a jolt of hope through him. He had expected fear, maybe helplessness, but Clara was no damsel in distress. She was a force forged in the furnace of her captivity. Dusty could feel her spirit rise like the sun breaking over the horizon, casting away the shadows of despair. They heard the rustle of branches and the crunch of gravel underfoot. The outlaws were regrouping, their shouts fading into a low growl. Dusty turned to Clara, his mind racing. "We need to find high ground. If we can see them coming, we'll have the upper hand." "Right. I saw a rise just a few yards back," Clara gestured, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Let's move." With a nod, Dusty took the lead, pushing through the underbrush, each step careful and calculated. The air was thick with the scent of dust and wild sage, the sun casting long shadows that danced like specters. They climbed the rise, the earth beneath them shifting slightly, but they pressed on, driven by the need to put distance between themselves and the outlaws. Once they reached the top, Dusty paused to catch his breath, the view sprawling out before them. The dusty plains rolled endlessly, dotted with sparse patches of scrub and the occasional outcropping of rock. In the distance, he could see the outlaws' campsite, a crude settlement of wooden shanties and flickering campfires. It was hard to believe that such a hellish place harbored men who had once been ordinary, just like Dusty. "Look," Clara whispered, pointing down toward the camp. "They're gathering." Dusty's eyes narrowed as he spotted the scarred leader among them, his presence commanding as he barked orders. The man's face was a roadmap of violence, scars crisscrossing like the trails of their lives, marked by battles fought and lost. Dusty felt a shiver run down his spine. He had faced many men in his time, but there was something particularly menacing about this one. "They're regrouping," Dusty muttered, clenching his fists. "They won't just let us go." Clara's gaze remained fixed on the camp, her brow furrowed in thought. "We need a plan, not just to escape, but to make sure they can't follow us." Dusty nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. "If we can create a diversion, we might slip away while they're occupied. But we'll need something loud, something that will draw their attention." Clara's eyes lit up. "The wagon! If we can set it ablaze, it'll draw them away from us for sure." Dusty's heart raced at the thought. "It's risky." "Risky is better than being caught." She turned to him, her expression fierce. "I won't go back to that life, Dusty. I refuse." A fierce admiration welled up within him. Clara was right. They were in a fight for their lives, and every moment spent hesitating could cost them dearly. "All right, then. We'll set the wagon on fire." They made their way back down the rise, careful not to make a sound, their feet silent against the dry earth. Dusty's mind churned with the possibilities, the risks. The wagon was a few hundred yards away, its battered frame a reminder of Clara's captivity. But it was also their ticket to freedom, a means to turn the tide against the outlaws. As they carefully approached the wagon, they could see that it was surrounded by a few of the outlaws, their laughter mingling with the crackling of the campfire. Dusty's stomach knotted with tension. They were too close. Clara pulled a small flask from her belt, filled with kerosene. "This should do the trick," she whispered, her eyes glinting with determination. Dusty nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'll create a distraction. When they turn to look, you light it and throw it inside. We'll have a chance to slip away." Clara's eyes softened for a brief moment, then hardened again. "Be careful." "Always am," he said, forcing a smile for her sake, though the truth was far from it. He was anything but careful, driven by a recklessness that had been born from loss and heartache. Dusty crept forward, heart racing, every muscle taut with anticipation. He could hear the outlaws' raucous laughter now, their voices like knives in the air. With a quick glance back at Clara, he readied himself. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the tension like a bolt of lightning. The outlaws turned, startled, eyes narrowing as they spotted him. Dusty didn't wait for their reactions. He grabbed a loose rock from the ground and hurled it into the campfire, sending embers flying into the air like angry fireflies. "Get him!" the scarred leader bellowed, his voice booming over the chaos. Dusty sprinted away from the camp, his heart pounding in his ears as he led the outlaws on a wild chase. He could hear their heavy boots pounding behind him, their shouts growing louder with each passing second. The adrenaline surged through him, fueling his every step. He glanced back just as he reached the thicket and saw Clara crouched low, the kerosene flask clutched in her hands. She met his eyes, and for a fleeting moment he saw the flicker of fear mixed with resolve. "Now!" he shouted, hoping she understood. Clara released the flask, her movements precise as she hurled it toward the wagon. It struck the wooden frame, and in an instant flames erupted, licking hungrily at the dry timber. Dusty felt a rush of triumph as he dodged into the thicket, hiding among the branches as the fire roared to life. The outlaws' raucous laughter was replaced by shouts of alarm. They turned to face the inferno, eyes wide with disbelief. "Fire! Get the water!" one of them yelled, their voices mingling with the crackling flames. Dusty and Clara shared a glance, their expressions mirroring the exhilaration of their success. "Let's go," Dusty urged, already moving through the thicket, his heart racing. They weaved through the underbrush, the sounds of chaos fading behind them. Dusty could feel the weight of Clara's presence beside him, a tether anchoring him to hope as they navigated the rough terrain. As they reached the edge of the thicket, Dusty paused, looking back to see the wagon engulfed in flames, the outlaws scrambling to contain the blaze. He could see the scarred leader in the midst of it, his face twisted in fury. "They'll be after us soon," Clara said, her breath coming in quick bursts. "Then we need to find a place to hide," Dusty replied, scanning the landscape for any sign of safety. "There's a canyon up ahead. We can take cover there." "Lead the way," Clara said, determination bright in her eyes. They moved quickly, each step taking them farther from the chaos that had threatened to consume them. The canyon loomed ahead, a dark maw in the earth, promising both danger and shelter. Dusty felt the weight of their choices pressing down on him, but with Clara at his side, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, bound by their shared defiance and the unyielding spirit that had brought them this far. The horizon stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, but in that moment they were no longer alone. They were a force, ready to reclaim their freedom and forge a new path through the desolate expanse of the Wild West. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The flames licked hungrily at the dry wood of the wagon, sending a plume of smoke spiraling into the sky like a dark omen. Dusty McCall and Clara sprinted toward the gnarled rocks of the canyon, hearts pounding in their chests, each footfall echoing the urgency of their escape. The distant shouts of the outlaws rang in his ears, a chorus of fury that tightened the knot of fear in Dusty's gut. "Keep moving," he urged, glancing back only briefly to see the men scrambling from their makeshift camp. Their faces twisted in rage, they pointed toward the fire, momentarily distracted from their quarry. The sight of their fury ignited a flicker of hope within him, mixed with the bitter taste of uncertainty. Clara, her breath coming in ragged gasps, kept pace beside him, the chains that had bound her just moments ago now a distant memory. She was a wild spirit, free yet raw, and Dusty couldn't help but admire her fierce determination. "Where to now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos behind them. Dusty's mind raced. "We need to get to the canyon's edge. There's a pass that leads to the river," he replied, his gaze darting to the craggy cliffs above them. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that danced across the rocky terrain. "If we can reach it before they regroup, we might stand a chance." Clara nodded, her eyes glinting with resolve. "Lead the way, Dusty." They rounded a rocky outcrop, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous. Dusty could hear the outlaws yelling now, their voices rising in anger as they realized their quarry had escaped. The thought of their wrath sent a shiver down his spine. He was a man who had lost too much, and the last thing he wanted was to lose Clara, too. As they climbed higher, the wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of charred wood and smoke. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Clara asked, her tone betraying the hint of fear she fought to suppress. Dusty paused, momentarily resting his hands on his knees to catch his breath. "They'll follow us if they don't give up," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "But we've got time. They'll have to regroup, figure out where we went." He straightened and gestured toward the canyon walls. "We can lose them in the crags and shadows. Just keep moving." With his mind set on survival, Dusty pressed onward, his thoughts a jumble of plans and regrets. He felt a pull toward Clara, a bond forged in the flames of desperation. There was something about her, a spark of defiance that ignited a flicker of hope within him. Maybe they were both seeking redemption, both yearning for a way out of the darkness that had consumed their lives. As they reached a narrow ledge overlooking the canyon, Dusty turned to Clara. "We can hide here for a moment, catch our breath," he said, scanning the horizon for any signs of their pursuers. The canyon was a beautiful, desolate expanse, the rocks rising like ancient sentinels above them. But beauty felt foreign in the face of their turmoil. Clara leaned against the rough stone, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "What happens next?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper.
Dusty hesitated, the weight of his own uncertainty heavy on his shoulders. He had never been one for plans, preferring the straightforward nature of cattle and open pastures. But this was different, an uncharted territory fraught with peril. "We need to find shelter, some way to defend ourselves if they catch up," he finally replied, his resolve hardening.
"But we also need to figure out how to get you free from those men for good." Clara's gaze pierced through him, a mixture of gratitude and determination shining in her eyes. "How do you know they won't come looking for me? They might know who I am." Dusty frowned, recalling the way the outlaws had treated her, like a possession rather than a person. "They might, but I reckon we can use that to our advantage. If they think you're just another lost soul, they might not expect you to fight back." A ghost of a smile flitted across Clara's lips, a spark of mischief in her expression. "You think I can fight?" Dusty chuckled, the sound a rough rasp in the stillness. "I reckon you've got more fight in you than most men I know, Clara. You just need the chance to show it." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Dusty felt a strange warmth bloom in his chest, a feeling he hadn't encountered in a long time. It was the flicker of companionship, of shared struggle, and he desperately wanted to nurture it. Suddenly, a shout echoed from below, shattering the fragile peace. "They went this way!" It was a voice Dusty recognized, the scarred leader of the outlaws, his tone dripping with malice. The sound sent a jolt through Dusty's veins. They'd found their trail. "Time to move," Dusty urged, gripping Clara's arm gently but firmly. They slipped away from the ledge, their hearts pounding as they navigated the narrow path along the cliff. Dusty's instincts kicked in, leading them deeper into the canyon's embrace, where shadows pooled like secrets. With each step, the walls of the canyon loomed larger, closing around them. Dusty felt the weight of Clara's presence beside him, her courage bolstering his own. "What's your clan?" Clara asked as they descended into the depths of the canyon. He hesitated, the truth clawing at him. "I don't know, but I'll figure something out. We can't let them catch us, not now." As they continued, the rocky terrain became more treacherous, sharp edges jutting out like teeth. Dusty focused on the path ahead, but he could feel Clara's eyes on him, as if silently urging him to lead them to safety. Ahead, a narrow cave mouth yawned in the rock, its dark depths promising both danger and shelter. Dusty glanced back, the distant shouts of the outlaws growing louder, their footsteps echoing in the canyon like thunder. "In there," he said, gesturing toward the cave. Clara nodded, determination etched on her face. "Let's go." They ducked inside, the cool air washing over them like a balm. Dusty's heart raced, adrenaline surging through his veins as he pressed against the cave wall, straining to hear any signs of their pursuers. Shadows danced around them, the flickering light from the entrance barely illuminating the rocky interior. "Do you think they'll find us?" Clara whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the darkness. Dusty shook his head, though he could feel the tension thrumming in the air. "Not if we're quiet. Just stay close." The cave felt both claustrophobic and safe, a sanctuary from the chaos outside. Dusty leaned against the cool stone, his mind racing with thoughts of the outlaws. He remembered the way they had laughed as they cornered Clara, the way they had taken her captivity for granted. Anger simmered within him, a fire kindled by the injustice he had witnessed. "Dusty?" Clara's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You're quiet." "I'm thinking," he replied, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. "We need to figure out how to take the fight to them. They won't stop until they find us." Clara stepped closer, the dim light illuminating the fierce determination in her eyes. "Then let's take the fight to them. I won't go back to that life, Dusty. I refuse." Dusty felt a surge of admiration for her spirit. "You're not just some damsel in distress, are you?" he said,
a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "No, I'm not," she replied, her voice steady. "And neither are you." As they huddled in the shadows, the distant sounds of the outlaws echoed through the canyon. Dusty knew they had a fight ahead of them, a fight for their freedom, for their lives. But together, they could face the darkness. "Let's make a plan," Dusty said, his voice low but determined. "We'll use the canyon to our advantage. If we can draw them in—" "Then we strike," Clara finished, a fierce light igniting in her gaze. Dusty nodded, the fire of hope kindling between them. They were bound by circumstance now, united in their struggle against the outlaws.
And as the darkness deepened around them, Dusty felt the stirrings of a different kind of strength, one he had thought lost forever. They had each other, and that was a force to be reckoned with.